With the support of Opera Barolo, a new permanent room has been set up with some ancient volumes from the 16th century onwards and a wide range of rare 19th century children's books. Specific highlights are dedicated to books with movable parts on technical educational topics, the relationship between animated books and paper toy theaters, and the history of Italian production. The new room is dedicated to the engineer Emilio Clara, a great bibliophile from Turin, whose heirs contributed to its arrangement. The history of ancient movable books shows that flaps and volvels are the main mechanisms used for mostly scientific and technical works. The flaps or strips of folding paper were mainly used in anatomical books to reveal the internal structure of the organs and apparatuses of the human body, as in the famous De Homine Figuris of René Descartes, here exhibited in the edition of 1664. In the late Teoria dei Giardini by Alexandre de Laborde, pre-1838, the lifting of the flap allows to reveal the layout of a garden before and after the designer's intervention, according to the new Romantic theories. The volvels, rotating discs made of membrane or paper, sometimes very complex, were used mainly for the simple calculation of astronomical and astrological phenomena, for the measurement of time and for navigation. They can also be found in treatises on philosophy, religion, and cryptography. Among the books on display, the most ancient is the Novae Questiones Spherae by Sebastianus Theodoricus, a didactic book for astronomical calculations in the 1578 edition. One of the most popular and widespread is the Trattato sulla Sfera by Girolamo Sacrobosco, here in the 1608 edition. Animated books for children appeared between the end of the 1700s and the beginning of the 1800s, immediately showed a close connection with the world of games, also proposing new types of interactive devices. An example is Little Fanny, one of the most famous movable books for children produced in England at the beginning of the 19th century, in which the book is transformed into a game, the game of dressing a paper doll. In other books with a more moralistic tone, the use of the flap returns to reveal details hidden beneath the allegorical figures. In the same years, in France, are spreading game books, consisting of backgrounds in which to insert cutout figures to build and animate scenes, such as the 4 booklets Le Jeu de Fable, dedicated to the tales of La Fontaine. The visit continues with some beautiful panorama books with educational ludic purposes, such as some rare alphabet books based on the doll's game and on music and geography education. A large album for young girls with composable figures enables to assemble floral bouquets and appreciate their symbolic meaning. The first book that offers real animations is the famous Le Livre Joujou by Jean-Pierre Bret of 1831, in which a system of levers and devices allows the reader to modify the shape of the characters and to magically make objects or constructions appear and disappear. Bret also conceived creative games, such as the Myriorama, that allow to compose, by combination, a very large number of different paintings and landscapes. Interest in movable books grew in Italy starting from the 1870s, thanks to publishers who were particularly committed to publishing for children, schools, and leisure reading, such as Hoepli, Vallardi Paravia, who however only imported and commercialized foreign copies, such as in French and German. The first movable book produced in Italy was Gioppino in cerca di fortuna, published by Treves in 1890, which set the lithographed figures in motion with a lever system patented by the publisher. Italian production spread in the early 1920s, especially with Bemporad, which we saw working on Pinocchio and which proposed other personage movable books of fairy tales. The war period marked the collaboration between Italian and German publishers, especially for military propaganda books. Immediately after the war, the Munari phenomenon boomed, with creative books that were immediately translated abroad. Speaking of Munari, it's displayed here, the most recent work among those exhibited. So Many People, published in Italy in 1983 and in the United States by the MoMA of New York. The volume Quattro Storie in Cellophane, 1957, is a little-known example of Italian design based on transparencies. Around the middle of the 19th century in Europe and also in Italy, there was a remarkable revival of anatomical and technical books with moving parts, flaps and volvels, used to explain the structure of the human and animal body and the functioning of complex mechanisms. An example is a book by the Turin publisher Lattice, exhibited here in the 1902 edition, with movable plates dedicated to a contemporary model of Fiat car. One of the most spectacular books is the one published in Turin for Lega Navale around 1900, with the deconstructed figure of a cruiser that opens for a length of almost 80 centimeters, showing 140 parts that can be lifted progressively, a true masterpiece of cartography. The very close relationship between animated books and theater is recalled through the Theater of Puppets, the game which perfectly animates fantasy characters and puts them on stage. Leverage systems make it possible to transfer this world to the two-dimensional pages of the books, inspiring the child to move the figures. The characters are mostly based on those from the Commedia dell'arte, such as Pulcinella, known throughout Europe and known in England as Punch. The paper theater can also be built by cutting it out and assembling it, as in the case of Teatro Minimo by Antonio Rubino, in which it is possible to animate the characters by reading the texts as scripts. Sometimes these movable books are inspired by the shadow theater, with silhouette figures to move backlight. Sometimes in the scenic books, by lifting the pages, it is possible to recreate real three-dimensional paper theaters on different levels, and even to move the different figures by using levers. Very spectacular is the 19th century theater book Guignol, 1880, inspired by the most popular French masque. It unfolds in 4 scenes that can be opened for a length of over a meter. In this way, the child can perform real miniature shows by moving paper puppets and following a script printed on the back. The itinerary ends with 2 displays showcasing some of the most recent acquisitions. The first one is completely dedicated to the great French panorama book of the end of the 19th century, representing the circus, one of the most popular themes in the childhood imagination of the time. In the second display case stand out 2 Dutch books with levers from the second half of the 19th century and colored with children's games and humanized cats. In the center there is the rare and precious paper toy Les Anamorphoses 1868, complete with 24 plates with anamorphic figures of real and imaginary characters. In the setting up of the new room, we gave more space to multimedia experience through video stations on specific themes, a big screen illustrating the functioning of the main mechanisms, and an interactive panel dedicated to ancient books. Another apposite station displays the animations inspired by the exhibited movable books and created by the students of Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia of Turin.